We always want to be paying attention to the signs. Yes, we always want to be doing that, but pay attention to the right signs, guys. There are a lot of signs out there. Some of them are fake. Some of them may lead you down a dead-end road. Not here, though. We don't take an off-season, and we don't take fake signs. Late Kick, however, is live, and we are jam-packed high atop a sun-soaked downtown Auburn, Alabama. We got Hugh Freeze on the show tonight. He's going to go a whole lot of different places and offer you a lot of different takes on a lot of different things. So if you're an Auburn fan or a Fresno State fan, as we always like to say, I think you'll find it very beneficial to listen to that. The Pate State Speaker Series, no end in sight. We're about 10 or 11 schools deep now. Got several left to go. So if we haven't been to your neighborhood yet, chances are we'll be there shortly. But in the meantime, many of you asked me, did you see that article in The Athletic yesterday? Well, yeah, friends. I pulled over to a rest stop somewhere between Starkville and Auburn. I saw it. I have some things to say about it. I don't think it's as it appears on the surface. I'll tell you that. We've got the mood tracker coming back tonight with Ole Miss. As I said, we got Hugh Freeze on the show one-on-one. The Volcanic Saturday that seemed to never find us last year. Will it find us this year? I've got 4 different days that I want to suggest to you could be utter chaos in college football this fall. So we got a jam-packed show, as I said, live as live can be here in Auburn, Alabama. They're watching us in Richmond, Virginia. I mean, they're watching us in Auburn, obviously, but they're also watching us in, let's see, Chattanooga, Tennessee, San Jose, California, Huntsville, Alabama. Thank you guys so much. They're doing hang cleans just off to my right now. Gelby can't show you because the cameras are fixed. We're right next to the weight room. It's such a beautiful sight. Happy to be on the road. All right. Make sure you, by the way, you're following on the socials at Late Kick Josh. Ton of stuff there I can't show you on the show because I, A, don't have permission, and B, don't have time. But you'll find a lot of stuff there as well. Okay, so I want to dive into the show tonight. I don't want to beat around the bush. I do want to tackle this head on. It's just, it's probably not going to go the way your mind may have gone. So a lot of you asked me, hey, did you see this thing on The Athletic about the future of college football and about how there's a group out there that wants to just completely blow the sport up and redefine it, and they're going to redefine what a conference is, and some haves will be left and some have-nots won't, and they want to restructure the playoff, and they want to do all this stuff. Well, of course I read it. Yeah, I saw it. I have a summary here in my hand. I wrote it down for you. It won't take long. Another group has another plan with another hidden agenda behind it. The end. I don't necessarily think it has a ton of traction. So why am I leading the show with it? Well, I think there's a ton to this. As I told you on December 30th, in that little tweet I fired off from Pasadena, California, and as I have alluded to a couple of times since then, there is a near unanimous consent behind the scenes that major changes are coming in college football and athletics. But specifically, there's never been a broader consensus, at least as far as I can tell, that there's big stuff coming, big changes coming in college football. So yesterday, when this story came out, I tweeted out the 3 little alert light emojis, and I put them out, and I said, hey, this is what I'm talking about. But the article's not what I'm talking about. So as you guys probably saw if you read this article, and if you didn't, it's over there right now on the Athletics College Football page, you saw that this group that has this grand idea has a lot of very interesting backers, and they have thus far been met with frosty reception at best from some of the power players in college football, i.e. the Big Ten, the SEC. And that's not by coincidence. That's by design. I don't necessarily think the story that is presented in the athletics piece is the big story. That's not the big eruption. Our buddy Chris, who loves this sport as much as anyone, man, one of our longtime listeners and viewers, he was very vocal yesterday, as he normally is, about anything expansion or realignment related. And he said, this seems like much to do about nothing. It looks like the big boys aren't on board with this. And I said, you're so close. I said that to him. You're so close. It's like Hannibal Lecter. You're so close to how you're going to catch him. How? Tell me how, doctor. Well, Hannibal Lecter did not tell Clarice how, because that would have been a really short movie. But I am going to tell you, Chris and everyone else, the story's not in this athletic piece. The story is what the SEC and the Big Ten are actually planning as a response or a deterrent to making sure this particular plan doesn't get off the ground. What you will notice, if you go back and comb through that athletics story, is you'll notice this little deadline we had a couple of weeks ago now, I guess it was, where there was this line in the sand. Remember, there was that big Friday. We were all looking forward to it. And there was this deadline, per se, where they had to have that new playoff contract agreed upon. Well, one fascinating tidbit in this athletic piece is that was self-imposed to try and get out ahead of this other plan that they didn't want to gain traction around the college football industry. So now, and granted, I didn't know that, so now that makes a little more sense. But in the broader scheme of things, I have and will continue to maintain to you, nothing about this is going to change in a significant way if it doesn't have the SEC's blessing and it doesn't have Greg Sankey's blessing. If it doesn't have the Big Ten's blessing and Tony Petitti's blessing and all of those chancellors and presidents, if they're not on board, nothing's really getting off the ground. And guys, that's not even to get into the weeds of how do you untangle these agreed upon television deals. So I don't even suggest you worry about that. I'm not particularly worried about it. If it doesn't get off the ground, it doesn't get off the ground. The big story is, what is the actual plan? Because they're right. The path in multiple fronts we're on right now is not sustainable, and everyone understands that. But what is the plan? You don't know. You don't know because there is no athletic feature. Ross Dellinger over at Yahoo is not spelling that out. It's behind closed door. It's under lock and key right now. There are people who know. I'll tell you this, since I'm a little removed from the event now and you guys haven't been tracking where I've been, I was somewhere in the last couple of weeks, talked to a very, very prominent person in the legal side of this entire thing. And this is a guy who knows his stuff. And he will, of course, remain nameless and faceless. But the sorts of details that he gave me were A, thoroughly vetted, B, meant to be kept off the record entirely, and C, sounded nothing like anything that's being reported. And that's just to say the real traction, the real gears that are turning behind the scenes are happening in virtual silence. And if someone is privy to it, they're not talking because it's a very, very uncrowded room. And so I don't doubt that there are a lot of groups like this and a few groups like this with plans. And I don't doubt that they've got a ton of thought and a ton of money put into and behind the plan. But if you don't have the blessing and sign off of the big boys, it's not going anywhere. Which begs the question I asked earlier today. The SEC and the Big Ten will ultimately decide the future of college athletics. Point blank, case closed. If you don't like that, it's going to be a tough future for you. I asked you guys earlier today, let's say you were the SEC. Let's say you were the Big Ten. You're kind of a king. You can do whatever you want to. What would your goal be in the future? Because I will tell you one thing that drives me up a wall is the attitude sometimes that the SEC and the Big Ten take, and that is, what will we let the ACC or the Big 12 have? What will we let the G5 have? And they're saying that from a position of power, and it's no different in college athletics than any other walk of life. If you enjoy the position of power, you sort of get to dictate some of the terms. What aggravates me is, unlike some walks of life, people in decision-making chairs in these big conferences did not build the conferences. They themselves have virtually no responsibility and no stake in why these are such valuable properties to begin with. The answer is fan engagement. The answer is the Southeastern Conference happens to have been built over decades and decades and decades by many different people, but it all had one common thread. Ditto in the Big Ten. The common thread is there are enough places with ties to those conferences where a whole lot of people care very deeply about the product on, let's say, the football field. Somewhere along the way, you became a commissioner. Somewhere along the way, you became an executive at a television network that has a contract with the league. You didn't build it. Okay, so this braggadocious, big-chested attitude, a lot of people take and they turn their nose up in the process of kind of scoffing, smirk on the face. Let's see what we'll let them have. How about this? How about you take 2 seconds and you ask yourself, why do you have the position of power? Why does the SEC enjoy the position of power? Well, we have the most money. Why do you have the most money? Well, because we've got really, really big member institutions that have won a lot. Why have they won a lot? I mean, did God create it that way? Like, is there somewhere in Genesis where the SEC or the Big Ten? Of course, that's not what it says, because of course, that's not how it happened. But what you did have at your disposal a long, long time ago is people in the state of Alabama or people in the state of Ohio that care a lot about football. They care a lot about athletics. To your benefit, tens and sometimes 100 years later, to your benefit. But my question today was, what would ultimately serve those people? What do people in the SEC or the Big Ten ultimately want? Because what you find is they don't care about the size of their conference's TV deal, nor should they. They don't necessarily care about the media markets that are encompassed by the SEC or Big Ten media rights deal, nor should they. They're actually college football fans. They are Michigan fans. They are Florida fans, but they're college football fans. And if you ask these folks, what they'd love is they'd love to beat that chest about the SEC. They'd also love college football as a whole to be better. Here's the great unknown. Greg Sankey in the SEC, Tony Petitti in the Big Ten, got virtually all the power in the room moving forward. How will they use it? Because that's going to decide the future of college athletics. I'm in a wait-and-see approach on that. I got voices on both shoulders telling me radically different things. I'm in a wait-and-see mode on that. But I will tell you, if you're waiting for the eruption to happen, it will happen. Fundamental change, major change is coming in this sport. It's coming in college athletics. It'll be when they're ready for it. Then and only then. Let's talk about some intel all around the country. Spring football, I got an itch on my nose. There's no easy way to do it when you're live. Once again, proof that we are live. What are we hearing? What are we hearing from all across the country right now? Spring football, got a lot of spring football games that are coming up this weekend, next couple of weeks. I'm going to take you to Tennessee right quick. So Kelsey Pope, how many people know who that is? That is the Tennessee wide receivers coach. I have heard rumors that a lot of people wanted Kelsey Pope because they're not rumors, they're fact. Tennessee was able to hold on to him, greatly enhanced his salary. That was a big-time retention piece. Sometimes you add coaches or lose coaches. Everyone's talking about it. What about the ones you keep? Tennessee kept him, and they placed a premium on the wide receiver position starting there. So they kept Kelsey Pope, big-time retention, but they weren't great at receiver last year, which stands to reason when you lose kind of talent they lost the year before. Well, they did a really good job addressing that position. And the early returns from the folks like Patrick Brown over at GoVols 24/7, talking to him, the early returns and the drum beats from camp is wide receiver looking really good. And remember, like Dante Thornton, Squirrel White, those guys are still there. They didn't exactly explode on the scene like they hoped they would have last year, but they're still there. But they're being pushed heavily by freshman enrollees and also transfer portal additions. So the wide receiver room at Tennessee, I expect to be very much upgraded this year. And remember, you got Nico Iamaleava throwing them the football now. So there's a lot of newness there, and I think for the better on the offensive front. At Alabama, we were just there the other day, and I forgot to talk to you about James Brockermeyer. Those of you who follow recruiting remember Tommy Brockermeyer, former five-star offensive tackle, and he's gone. I think he has since retired medically. I think. But his brother's still at Alabama, James Brockermeyer. And James Brockermeyer was forgotten and overlooked when he came in, and he's stayed and he's paid his dues and he's worked his tail off. And one of the surprises of spring at Alabama is that kid is in the running to be the starting center at Alabama. Parker Brailsford is a guy Bama fans are talking a lot about because he comes in from Washington and kind of having a difficult time getting a read on what exactly is happening with that whole situation. But James Brockermeyer may very well start at center for Alabama. And that's certainly not a headline most people saw coming. But Alex Scarborough, going back and forth with him, some of the guys over at Bama 24/7, that's a big story. I mean, that's a big story. And I think most of you, even if you're not a Bama fan, remember last year, one of the things that stood between them and winning a national championship was the center position, snapping the football. And you can make of that what you will. Also, when I was, kicking over a few rocks up there in Tuscaloosa the other day, couldn't help but overhear a lot of people talking about Zabian Brown. Zabian Brown is a true freshman. It's a five-star corner. I think that's where he's listed at. He came from Mater Dei, as have millions of other five stars in the past. He is going to be a star for Alabama. 100% ball. very much of the same cloth that a kid like Caleb Downs or Minka Fitzpatrick were cut from. Now, he's in their DB room, and that's kind of why I go by that comparison. But he's got elite talent, and he doesn't seem to care about anything else. And so that's a dude who's just in the building, and then when he's not in the building, he's focused on what happens in the building, just football. That kid's name was in everyone's mouth, I can tell you, when we were at Alabama. And Red Morgan, who's a 4-star safety, also a true freshman from just down the road where we are right now at Central of Phoenix City, his name was also in many a mouth there at Alabama. So those are two DBs. Now, I still expect them to look at the corner position in the portal, but those are two names, if you want to go ahead and circle them, Xavier Brown and Red Morgan, that I expect to be early, maybe even freshman contributors in the secondary for Alabama. Clemson, I talk about wide receiver every time I talk about Clemson, and I always, what you don't see beneath the camera is I have my fingers crossed that I'm going to have good news. I'm going to have good things to talk about. I'm going to have speed and electricity in the receiver room to talk about. Past couple of years, I haven't had it. Maybe I have it now. Maybe. So Bryant Wesco Jr. is a kid they brought in. He's a 4-star wide receiver from Texas. Very different skill set. Vertical threat. Yards after catch ability, very, very, very fast player. Just they haven't had enough of it in that room. And Dabo Swinney's been very vocal this spring, talking about how he's everything we hoped he would be. You know, you can go find all the critical factors you want. Does it translate? I mean, do they keep their head on straight as a freshman? Well, so far, so good with him. That's very encouraging. The 5-star linebacker they got, Sammy Brown, ditto. Everything they thought he was, and he was a big-time wrestler in high school as well. Everything they hoped they were getting there, they've gotten. So I think both those guys will be on the field as true freshmen. Just good vibes from the offense. Austin Hannon over there at Clemson 24/7, saw him talking earlier today about how just the vibes from the offense, a lot better. That's not the first time you've seen that headline in spring. Like, no one talks about the vibes being bad in spring. But I think sometimes if the vibes aren't great, they don't lie to you. And so the feedback we get from Clemson, you learn how to decipher it. That's good news. They wouldn't just be saying that, in other words. So that's good news. At Iowa, hadn't given you a spring update from Iowa. You know, they brought in the new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester. Same thing. Cautiously good vibes there. Now, I don't know how much you could bank on Iowa's offense improving. I wouldn't say drastic. Cade McNamara, for example, the starting quarterback's been out the whole spring with an injury. He'll be fine, but he's not active. So they got themselves a nice little QB2 battle going on right now. David Eicholt up at Hawkeye Insider, I wanted to know, like, what's the takeaway? He said they'll probably look at the portal maybe at that position, but just in general, they're trying to figure out, like, is the offense going to be better? Well, it can't be worse, literally. How much better will it be? We'll see. I mean, Iowa plays a very complimentary style. I don't take Kirk Ferentz as the kind of guy who's going to look at any amount of public criticism and have his mind changed on things. So Iowa offense kind of is what it is, but that doesn't mean they couldn't get fractions and increments better here and there. So that's what we're hearing from around the country right now. Fascinating times with spring games on deck. I got Hugh Freeze on the show in just a few minutes. Happy to have you guys with us, whether you're watching live or, well, if you're listening the next morning. I appreciate it however and wherever you listen. Just make sure you subscribe while you do it. We've been doing the mood tracker all throughout spring. How's the fan base feeling? If you're a Minnesota fan and you want to know how outside fan bases are feeling about the program, hey, here's your shot. I want to talk to you about Ole Miss for a second. You seen these odds? Our friends over at FanDuel, for example, you seen these odds on Ole Miss? You see how highly thought of they are? Could this actually be the year? Well, all Ole Miss fans are asking that. I would call the mood amongst the Ole Miss fan base just ready to storm the gates, ready to storm the castle. No one's looking forward to 2025. No one's talking about building for the future. Those are all great things to have in mind. Ole Miss fans, kind of like Michigan folks last year for a different reason. They look at 2024 and then they see the edge of a cliff and they're not worried about what's beyond that because they know they've built for this year. They are totally equipped as best they can be from a roster perspective. I shared with you that I think if you account for the additions they made and just the overall upgrade in grading guys from last year to this year, I think their staff is better this year than it was last year. It's one of the best staffs in the SEC. I don't know how, I don't think you can overstate how good a job Lane Kiffin and his people have done at putting that staff together. So they've put the roster together. They've put the staff together. They've still got doubt. So if you're counting on that stuff, they'll still be doubted. No one's picking Ole Miss above Georgia. I don't think they will. I think folks will give Texas a long look over Ole Miss. You'll still have a lot of Alabama noise, even with Saban gone. So you've got all the pieces in place from a tangible perspective. From the intangible outside perspective, you'll still have that same doubt you've always had. They're in a position at Ole Miss where the sport has kind of come to them. We got coaches all over the country talking mainly off record about how they hate this, and that about college football this year. And Kiffin's been vocal about it as well. It's not like he's waving a pom-pom loving where things are at right now, but they're where they need to be. So whether they like it there or they've held their nose while doing it, they've leveraged their position within the confines of what college football currently is, and they've positioned themselves very well. Nick Saban's gone, and that was an albatross around their neck every year trying to beat Alabama. Mississippi State is in a state of flux right now with yet another new coaching staff. The schedule this year is, by SEC standards, about as manageable as it's going to get. And so what more could you ask for? This is not the time to prepare. This is not the time to kind of wink and nod and say, hey, not too long from now, not too far down the road, we'll have our shot. We got our shot for Ole Miss. We got our shot this year. Don't know how many of these you get either. So you got your shot this year. I would be foaming at the mouth if I were an Ole Miss fan. It's still April, May, June, July, August, an eternity. That's a third of a year, according to Stats and Info. It may be the longest summer in the history of Oxford, Mississippi. But don't worry, I have it on good authority. The fall will get here. In recorded history, fall has never failed to follow summer. And it won't this year either. But man, what a time. What a time for Ole Miss fans. I'm not going to say if not now, when. I won't say that. But I will say this is the best shot that I've seen Ole Miss set to have in a long time. Now, before I get to Hugh Freeze, I wanted to talk to you about one thing. Someone asked us several weeks ago, candidly, which of these Saturdays this fall could be the big, volcanic upset Saturday? And I meant to talk about it, and I didn't. Scratch that. That's probably on Jesse more so than me. I'm mainly interested in the credit. So, Jesse, take the blame and take it proudly. But we are talking about it tonight. The Volcanic Saturday is a staple of college football. That's where you wake up at 10 a.m. and think you have it all figured out, and by the time the dust settles at sundown, you may have lost a lot of money, but at the very least, you're totally disheveled. You can't believe what just happened. Wow. Upsets all over the place, every time frame. Well, that didn't happen last year, which is ironic because it was a very, relatively speaking, competitively condensed year. I mean, there were a lot of teams in play. We just didn't get the Volcanic Saturday. Well, where could that come this year? I've got 4 candidates for you. Week 1, you may not have to wait long. It would be fitting, actually, if Week 1 chose to just go off the rails. So to close the weekend, we have Southern Cal versus LSU in Las Vegas. That's the Sunday night game. But before that, you realize Miami opens at Florida. You could cut the tension with a McDonald's plastic knife. That's how thick it'll be. Humidity as well. But it'll be really, really touch and go for whoever loses that one. Georgia plays Clemson in Atlanta. So you'll find a lot out about that Georgia defensive line. You'll find a lot out about that Clemson wide receiver core, for example, in the offense in general. Notre Dame opens at Texas A&M. That's a helmet game. That's a beautiful matchup, and bless the fine folks at Notre Dame for going on the road in an environment like that in Week 1. Notre Dame never plays anyone, except they do every year. So that's also Penn State plays West Virginia in Week 1. I'll just leave this there. What if West Virginia pulls that one out? They were doubted last year and overcame and overachieved. What if they started this year with a win over Penn State? I'll leave that with you there. We move on to Week 9. Not that craziness couldn't befall the sport between Week 1 and Week 9, but Week 9 is pretty loaded. And if you ask me where we're going to be this week, I have no clue. Missouri at Alabama. Keep in mind, this is Week 9. So is Bama an undefeated team, a 2-loss team? Same with Missouri. Could be a playoff dark horse contender. Oklahoma's at Ole Miss that day. LSU at Texas A&M. is that day. Florida State at Miami is on this day. I think it should bear close watching that Nebraska's at Ohio State. I will be paying attention to like West Virginia at Arizona. That could be a phenomenal game because, as you know, the Big 12, I have decreed to be America's college football conference in 2024. So there will be a lot of very, very balanced and competitive games every week out there. What about week 11? 2 weeks later. That's Bama at LSU week. That's Oklahoma at Missouri. That is Georgia on the road at Ole Miss. That's one of the bigger games in the Grove in recent memory. And especially if those records hold up there, then you got Florida at Texas on this same day. You've got Washington at Penn State. Have no clue what Washington's going to be this year. But if they're better than expected, imagine them going into Happy Valley. What's Penn State by that point, by the way? Clemson is at Virginia Tech on this day. FSU is at Notre Dame on this day. That, as of now, may be the only game that Florida State is a point spread underdog in the entire year. We'll see how that plays out. And then a few weeks later, of course, we have rivalry weekend. That is week 14. That is Thanksgiving week. You got the Iron Bowl going down in Tuscaloosa. You've got Florida at Florida State. And then at the same time, Oklahoma is closing their season on the road at LSU. You know what? I'm going to get back to this one in a second. We've got Michigan, Ohio State. But do you realize Texas A&M cranks back up? I will say this. We're going to have some charged environments this fall. We always do. College football is the greatest sport on the face of the earth because of that. I challenge you to find me an environment that will be more electric in 2024 than Kyle Field when Texas comes to town. It's going to be some tough decisions to be made on our end because there are honestly 3 or 4 games on this weekend that I would circle. But we can't be at more than 1, or can we at NetJets? But we really struggle to be at more than 2, let me put it that way. And so someone's going to get left out. Maybe it's us that gets left out. But Texas at Texas A&M. How delicious is that? Washington's at Oregon that day. Notre Dame's at USC. These are games we couldn't even fit on the graphic. So week 14, week 11, week 9, week 1, I think those will deliver at the very least. If you would like to, let's say, bet $25 on one of those games right now, and it's legal in your state, you could do so at FanDuel. If you don't feel like betting, and at that point it doesn't matter because the internet's legal no matter where, if you know how to click the right buttons, you could just go check out those point spreads, those future odds at FanDuel. They're already there. Games of the year will start populating that FanDuel college football feed in short order. You can already bet on conference title odds, make or miss the playoff odds, whatever your fancy. I'm just here to humbly suggest to you that our betting odds provider, FanDuel Sportsbook, has you covered as a resource, as a tool, as your betting center, whatever you want it to be, it can be that for you. And it's going to be a lot for us. They're going to be a lot for us this fall. I got an email from them earlier today that I literally just now remembered I have to open. So I appreciate it. We're about to have Hugh Freeze on the show. And as you know, I like to kind of fade out. There's no sense in us talking to Freeze for 25 minutes and then coming back for me to just tag out and say goodbye. So I'm going to tell you goodbye now. I'm going to tell you we'll be live Sunday night. And I'm going to tell you thank you to our crew here and our crew down in Fort Lauderdale. And I'm going to toss it now to our sit down earlier today with Auburn head coach Hugh Freeze. Take a listen. So I allegedly live in Nashville. I haven't seen Nashville in weeks. When's the last time you saw Nashville?
I was there last night. It was, man, I'm excited about Chiefs being open on Broadway. Eric Church is a good friend, and Jill and I went up to be a part of that celebration. And so Nashville's changing and I mean, people are everywhere there. It's a crowded place, but a lot happening, it seems,
yeah,
for those that live there. But we like going to Nashville, but it was a late night for us, and I don't like those.
So we were here last year, year 1, it's in the books. Everyone knows what happened. Yeah. I have no clue what's going to happen this fall. If you know, I'd love you to tell me. But I do know it feels a little bit more relaxed maybe than it did last year. But that's me. How do you feel in year 2?
Yeah, I definitely, for me, I'm more at ease with and comfortable, I would say, with where we're headed. And I was a little, I've said this a lot of places, and I don't want this to sound as negative toward anyone, because ultimately everything falls in my lap, and I own that. But it just, the chemistry was not exactly the way I wanted it to be, and that doesn't mean people are good or bad or anything. It was. I've kind of in my mind got the band back together a little bit, and there's just a comfort level with that for me, and getting the offense back to the terminology that I'm very comfortable with. Also brings some of that, and then DJ Durkin's energy has really, and he's so detailed. He and Charles Kelly have brought a chemistry over there that, and we were really good on defense at times last year. Ron's one of the best game day callers I've been with, and but that energy that they've brought has made me feel more at peace too. So, I don't know that means any more in the win column or not. I don't know. We're still a little short on the roster in my mind. Of where we need to be. We're headed in the right direction for sure. But I've loved the attitude and the energy and the passion that they brought to spring practice, and the players have really responded well to that.
Let's say you're midway through a season. I don't know when you started to feel whatever you felt last year, but let's say you're in a season, and it could be a Tuesday practice, it could be third quarter of a game, whatever it is. You just realize, I do not have something like chemistry where I want it to be on this team. You certainly can't address it wholesale that week.
Right.
But what is that realization like? And then you try and hold it together, and you try and get to the finish line as best you can. But how much can you do in the moment versus how much you say December, January, let's go? Yeah,
it's that's truthfully the first time I've gone through something that I felt some of that. And I'm not sure I know how to properly address it immediately, because we had good men and good people in the building, and you want to treat people right, and that was difficult, and it was hard. And I'm not saying that we were what we were last year, and I don't know that it produces any more wins or not. Obviously, we should have beat Alabama, I think, but the level that we played at, or lack thereof, in some games was just concerning to me. That I didn't think the expectation of how we prepare to compete every single game, just didn't feel like, and look, that's not just on coaches, that's the team's got to own that too, the leadership of the team. And so trying to figure all of that out was challenging for sure.
How accountable do you feel like your building is? Because when you're talking about it not all being on one group, it's on the collective. Well, that means coaches got to suck it up and bite the bullet and look themselves in the mirror. It means players do. It means everyone does. You feel like you got the accountability you need in the building?
It's definitely trending the right direction. We when I came back in January after the bowl game, I think I have to first look at myself, and I need to be a better listener. And so I set the culture council down, the 12 guys that the team has elected, and I said, I'm going to take a step back, and I want you guys to come up with the standard you want for this team. Now, I'm not saying I'll agree with all of it. But maybe I'm too old school. Maybe some of my thinking needs to change. And we're in a new day and era in college football, and so I want you guys to sit in a room and come up. And I mean, when I say a standard, I want what a locker should look like, to what is on time for us, what the whole deal, training table. What do you want from the training table? Because maybe me getting frustrated that somebody's not there I want them there 3 times a day, you know, or all right, if you don't want that, if that's not the standard, you know, just everything. And boy, they presented it to me, and then not only do you present me the standard, but what does the accountability look like if somebody chooses not to meet the standard? I mean, what does that look like? Because if we're just going to put the standards down and not be accountable, they're really worthless. And boy, they had a great presentation. I agreed with almost every single thing. They convinced me to change a little bit in some areas, and then we presented it to the whole team and said, hey, speak now or forever hold your peace. But this is what we're saying the standards are, and now it's player-led, and the accountability is player-led, and we're at a pretty good percentage of the standard being met. We're batting 100 on holding them accountable if they don't, and I think that's life. And so I'm really pleased with where that's trending.
A lot of new head coaches, if I look at them, I'll say, boy, what a time to be a new head coach. So much is changing about the sport, and you got thrown in the middle of it. And I think that's accurate, but at the same time, what about guys like you who have been around a while? And so you may have gotten used to a generation, and then things change, and they're in the process of changing as we speak. I have no clue what 2027 will even look like.
Right.
How much of, not your core philosophy, those things normally stay the same, but maybe they don't, but how much have you had to really, really redefine about the parts of you that maybe 15 years ago you thought would never have to change?
Yeah. I think it's probably easier on a first-time head coach that hasn't done it, but you know, the guys that have done it a while, in our conversations, we're all battling the same internal battles of, you know, most of us got into coaching for a transformative work in not only the lives of our young men, the lives of our staff, and the life of our program for all the fans, which does hopefully look like winning. And the challenge I have is I don't want to start feeling like it's transactional. And that's the battle. And it really can steal your joy. So my wife has made me promise that 2024, there is no more complaining about the new college football world.
None, zero.
To her, anyway, she don't want to hear it. And when I say I'm not against some of the things that I think players should have access to be blessed with financial things because of all of that our sport produces. I'm for that. The lack of structure drives me crazy. And it's just managing an 85-man roster right now, which that's for us that have done it, man, it was pretty easy to manage your 85-man roster. Now I have no idea how to do it. And I don't think anyone does, because it's going to change again here in a minute, April the 15th, and the portal opens again, and what's going to happen? And it's just, I don't know. I really feel like one of my strong suits was always building a culture that ultimately was going to win. And I guess the scary thing to me is, does my way still work? Doing it that way, and I've been the first to say I would love to continue to build this program through high school recruiting. And we kind of proved that in 24. We stayed strong to it. We didn't sign many portal kids at all. Now, we signed a really good class, and you'll see them at practice today. I think they're all very gifted. Do they stay with us and allow us to, build a program? And does our culture win them over to stay in that? And those are all the things that keep you up at night, that you just kind of wonder, does your way still work? And can it still be transformative and not just transactional? So don't know if I answered your question. It's just it's a lot of challenges.
We were with Mac Brown up in North Carolina last week, And now, granted, he walks in fresh off a coach's meeting, so he had a lot to say.
Yeah.
But he said, I think one of the faults, if we could look in the rearview mirror, is people who have some answers stepped back when things started to change. And all we did when we stepped back is we let the wrong people put the hands on the wheel. He said, I think one of the biggest things I feel right now is a willingness for folks who always probably should have had their hands on the wheel to roll their sleeves up, get folks who don't need to be in the way out of the way, and maybe get the thing righted, which is a multifaceted statement, and it's not an overnight thing, but you get to a vantage point that we don't get. You get in meetings that we don't get to be in and have conversations we don't get to be privy to. No one's crazy about how things are right now. When you look out in the future, is there something you see on the horizon, or is it just is what it is?
I have no clue. And I ask that question often. Everybody will, in the administrative world will give you the answer. We feel like something's got to change. Well, we sure hope so. But no one has really said, here is the answer. It's like when we went to D.C. to meet with, all of the legislation there, and everybody sits in a room and we look at each other, and it's not that they're not trying, but they're looking at us. Or what is the answer? I don't know that any of us really have the exact answer that's going to please everyone. And I don't know that you can reverse some of the things, but we do have to find a way to get some structure around it, in my opinion, whether it's bringing the collectives in-house and saying this is like the NFL has done, and there's a collective bargaining structure, particularly for, the biggest struggle, I think, for most of us coaches that are older, particularly is the locker room, where you can have guys that can get a collective deal that is a lot more than the starter and junior and senior, and that's challenging and that's difficult, and man, when you're out recruiting and they're trying, and man, it's just very challenging when there's so many players involved in it, and you want to get the players for Auburn University that are the best players. And there's a lot of challenges that come with that.
When you guys wrapped your bowl game, you start looking ahead towards next year. You started talking about the quarterback competition for the next year. And now we're at spring, and you've sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong here because I'm not on the beat every day, but you've talked about Pate Thorne, and you've said that's QB1 right there. Like that's the guy who is in that driver's seat for now. The phrasing sounded a little bit different to me from post-bowl game to now. So tell me if anything changed behind the scenes, what changed, and then what have you seen from him, and how does his role change with the rest of the changes that you've made in the offense?
Yeah, he's had his best. The last 2 weeks he's been really, really solid and impressive. He is in the driver's seat. I don't think it's prudent of me to say today that it's totally his, because I want Hank and Holden and even Walker to continue to try to compete for it. But I do think it's going to be hard to probably unseat him at least for the start of the year, and then it's his to do with what he can. Hopefully we have better pieces around him that enable him to have a better year. The guy was pretty dang good at Michigan State when he had 2 NFL receivers, and hopefully we can put better pieces around him and a system that maybe he's more comfortable with. He loves what we're doing right now, and I think he's excelling at it. We got to continue to get more players around him, but I've been really pleased with this spring. But Hank and Holden have had really good springs too. Walker is incredibly talented, but he's just a high school senior, and he's learning. And DJ Durkin's throwing a lot at him, but I love everything about him and his leadership quality. But Peyton's had a really solid spring, and is definitely in that driver's seat.
So I was walking down the hallway. You guys were walking into a team meeting, and I'm asking folks, "Hey, who's that? Who's that? Who's that?" And every one of them I keep pointing out from an impressive, physical standpoint. I keep hearing, "Oh, that's a freshman.
Yeah.
Oh, he's 17. Oh, he's about to be 18." How many of these guys, as much as you can say in spring, are going to play meaningful football for you this year?
More than I desire, but they're going to have to, and I do think they're really talented kids. But are they ready to step into the SEC and play? Maybe not, but they're going to have to, and we'll see how they do. I mean, the Cam Coleman's of the world, he's been really impressive in spring, but Amaris Williams and Waller at defensive ends are going to have to play some. They're going to give us some minutes for sure. Some inside guys. The DBs, I think, are talented, the young ones. But some of them are going to have to play for sure. And heck, our kicker, Towns, he's, we got a good kicker coming back. He hadn't practiced this spring because he's got an injury, but Towns has got a leg that's off the charts now.
You've had different kinds of teams. You've had some that are veteran, senior laden. You've had sometimes, maybe not quite like now, but like now where you've known in spring, we're going to go as far as some of these true freshmen or first-year starters can carry us. When you start training a team's mentality in spring and you start making sure it's hammered into your coaches' heads in spring, that's the way it's got to be. How much different of a lift is it when you know you're counting on younger guys as opposed to returning starters, kind of a player-led team already?
Yeah.
How different a lift is that? How different a mentality is that as a coach?
I think we needed that here, really. I think we needed to kind of hit the restart button with, some guys that were maybe fresher to Auburn than some and didn't have set ways of doing things. And I love the way we've kind of set this accountability with this young class, and I'm anxious to see what they do. So I do think that is something we kind of needed here. And I do believe, though, we all know how everybody wants it now, and I do too, but I'm also realistic, and I think we can build something special here again. Auburn's done it before. I think you can do it, but what I do think everybody has to understand, especially those young freshmen, is failure is a myth. If handled right, it's just really not accurate. It's a bad way to look at things. And so I've really tried this whole spring to explain to them the process to success, the cycle of success is you get tested, you fail, you learn, you improve, and you re-enter. And that's how you handle failure. And we're going to fail some. You're going to fail some. I probably call more bad plays than I call good ones over my career. That doesn't. Michael Jordan played 15 years, won 6 championships. The other 9 were a failure. No, but it's just the success. The cycle of success is always, test, fail, learn, improve, re-enter. And so we've been drilling that hard for them because as well as I, as soon as you're going to go build up Cam Coleman, I build up Cam Coleman, and as soon as he doesn't perform on a game to that level, all the voices in the social media world will tell him how awful he was. That's the wrong voice to listen to. You need to listen to this voice: test, failed, learn, improve, re-enter. So that's our approach with this talented 24 class.
You mentioned that April 15th date, which everyone already hates because it's tax day, and now all of a sudden it's portal day as well. So God bless every one of you guys. How weird is it in the new age? I'll kind of get you out of here on this. How weird is it when an old school perspective was you pretty much know who your team is in the spring? How weird is it to know there is an exit door and an entry door that's after spring ball? The next thing you do is break fall camp, and your team could, in some ways, fundamentally alter and then copy paste that for everyone. Like, how different is that? It's
incredibly uncomfortable and different, and it's not what I was used to, and I think I've got to embrace it. I was talking to Drinkowitz last night, and I think he's done a great job of embracing it. And I've got to become more like that and just say, you know what, I can't change it, so I've got to embrace it. It's uncomfortable to me to recruit a person for 24 hours. It really is. That's, I'd like to have the year and a half where I really think I know who I'm getting. And But that's not the way it will be come April the 15th. We're gonna have some exit here, I'm sure, and we'll be looking to try to add some. So I've got to embrace it.
You got a lot on your plate. We appreciate you welcoming us.
Thank you,
today.
buddy.
Hugh Freeze.
Yep.